am Ben. I am the former co-founder of Mode, which is like a polite way to say like, I also spend a good bit of time like yelling at the internet in kind of a grumpy way, so take that all like as an intro to what this might be like. But naturally, like I want to start where all these things start, which is the Olympics, specifically the 2024 Olympics, and specifically gymnastics and women's gymnastics and the women's floor exercise, which is that big thing in the middle. So there's like an event final to figure out who is the best in the world at the floor exercise. This is like a thing that is just how the Olympics work. In 2024, these were the people who were competing for it. And so they all went out and did a bunch of crazy stuff. Here is Simone Biles doing like a crazy thing. And so like a big part of this, right, if you're doing this event, is to be like, how do you judge who is the best? Like, to me, this is all insane. How do we decide which one of these is the best of these people who competed? And so there's a whole process for it. I did not know this until recently, but this is the whole process. Some of you may be familiar with it. So you start with what is called the D score, or the difficulty score. It's like your starting score. This is the combination of scores of the 8 hardest elements in your routine, as determined by the table of elements and the code of points. This is the code of points. It's like a giant PDF. It's full of stuff like this, which is like weird diagrams and all this stuff and tables and things like that. And so these are the things that define what goes into your D score. You get 8 elements in them, so like E1 plus E2 plus E3, blah, blah, blah. So that is your starting score. The next thing you have is an E score, which is your execution score. That is like the classic 0 to 10, perfect 10 kind of thing, where the judges judge you based on artistry and form and technique and all the things that, I guess, make gymnastics gymnastics. After that, there are penalties. These are like the things that we sit on the couch and yell at people for like, oh my God, they took a step on their landing. And it's falls and all that sort of stuff. And so there's like standardized deductions for penalties. And you add all this up and you get a final score for what your score is. And so in this event in 2024, this was the scores after all but one competitor had gone. Rebecca Andrade, the Brazilian, was in first place. Simone Biles kind of messed up and had all these deductions and was surprisingly in second. And then 2 Romanians were tied for third, with the Ana Barbosa ahead because the tiebreaker is on your E score, and so she was in third and the other one was in fourth. And Jordan Childs was the last one to go. So an American, Jordan Childs, was the last person to perform. And when she went, she did her routine. She got a score. She had a difficulty score of 5.8. She got an execution score of 7.866. She got 0 penalties. Nice job. And her score was 13.66, which if you like put that in the ranking, it comes in 5th, which like, damn, that's not a medal. Bummer. However, Jordan Childs' coach noticed something. She noticed that this difficulty score of 5.8 was actually calculated wrong, that they did not include the points the right way, and this should actually have been a 5.9. And so if you do the math and say that's actually 5.9 instead of 5.8, this score would change to a 13.766, and then if you re-rank them, she comes in third. So she should get a medal. And so her coach went to the judges, and they said, like, hey, this was wrong. The judges said, yes, you're right. Jordan Childs got third. She got a medal. They took this very cute picture. And so great, okay, that's what happened. But there are other characters in this story, like namely this woman. This is Ana Barbosa. This is the woman who was in third and then became in fourth. So like bummer for her, here's her finding out. She then had coaches and they went into a different rule book, the technical regulations for 2024. These have the regulations for how you inquire about a score. And it says their inquiries for a difficulty score are allowed, provided that they happen before the last gymnast goes, or before the gymnast who is next goes. But that doesn't work, because if you remember, Jordan Childs went last, so there is no next gymnast. So what do? You have to go to the next part of Article 8.5, which says, for the last gymnast in the rotation, you get 1 minute. You have to protest in 1 minute. And so she went to the judges and said, okay, actually it was 1 minute and 24 seconds. So she took this to the Court of Arbitration for Sport, which is a thing. They consulted with the official timekeeper of the Olympics. And discovered it was not 1 minute and 24 seconds. In fact, it was 1 minute and 4 seconds. But that is more than a minute. So they said, actually, that score is disallowed. She gets a 5.8. She is back in 5th. And Ana Barbosa got 3rd. Jordan Childs naturally filed a lawsuit with the Federal Supreme Court in Switzerland, which had a bunch of stuff in it about this, which is like synchronization of video recordings and audio recordings. This is an insane document to read. But this was how they were trying to figure it out. But this is actually not where the story ends, because there's also this woman. This woman was the woman who came in 4th or 5th, we don't know. Her name is Sabrina. You'll notice she has this deduction, this 10th point deduction. That, from the code of points, is for stepping out of bounds. It was here. 1 step landing out of bounds is a 10th point of deduction. This is a video of her stepping out of bounds. You may notice she ain't out of bounds. So she was like, actually, you know what? This should be a 0. If that's a 0, my score should not be that. It should be this. That would put me in 3rd. And importantly, even if you take Jordan Childs' score and make it back a 5.9, that means that's a 13.766. Jordan Childs ends up in 4th. So I should get 3rd. So she filed another thing with this tribunal saying, hey, this was wrong. This penalty was given without merit. Her score should there be increased to 13.8. A day or so later, the tribunal came back with their media release and said Jordan Childs' thing was after the 1-minute deadline. It is disallowed. Her score is dismissed because you can't actually file like reviews on deductions. And so this is where we were like 2 days after the Olympics. Then Nadia Comaneci tweeted about it or posted on Instagram about it. People argued in the comments about what you're allowed to do. Romanian prime minister decided they're not going to go to the closing ceremony. Jordan Childs filed more lawsuits. Someone proposed just give them all silver medal or bronze medals because nobody knows what to do. And then 457 days later, we still do not know what the fuck is going on. Okay. So how do we get here? Like, what are we talking about? I mean, this or in general. So what happened? Basically, a lot of us know there used to be like regular ways to judge the Olympics. It would be like judges. They watch the events. They give them scores. They write it all down. That was like kind of famously corrupt. And there were a lot of scandals with this. Particularly, there's something happened in 2004, I think, in Athens. They're like, we've got to get rid of this system. We reverted to this code of points, which is this very elaborate way of like scoring things numerically. And it says stuff like this in it about means to provide an objective means for evaluating gymnastics to get away from this like subjective thing of judges. But there's another thing kind of in this that I think is reflective of a broader trend that we want to take a small detour from whatever detour we're currently on, which is there was this famous article in the New York Times, I don't know, this was 5-10 years ago, about the music that we like. It was like, what music do we think is best as individuals? And so this was the chart that explained it. And basically what it says is everybody thinks the best music was the music when they were teenagers. The most popular music to us is like whatever it was when we were growing up. And so the Washington Post looked at this a little further. They put out another sort of like study or whatever they do that was basically found that a ton of things are like this. That the most close-knit communities were when we were like teenagers. The most moral society, the best music, the best fashion, the best economy, the best sporting events, all of this stuff, the best things were all when we were teenagers. And so if you like generalize this, it basically says the best stuff is like this. It comes from our adolescence, that whatever it was when we were like growing up in sort of our formative years, this is when we decide what is best. And so like, okay, what is our best stuff professionally? And for a lot of us, like that kind of formative thing is basically this. It's basically we were all people who are like, we aren't these old geezers who are doing things on vibes and like scouting people and that. We are like the quantitative people. We are thinking about things rigorously. There's a whole generation of people who idolize this kind of thinking. And so it's either Moneyball, or if you like take the sort of more political angle, it was like we used to have all these talking head pundits like David Brooks, and then we had a Nate Silver. This is all from like the Charlie Rose show, like oops. And so this is now kind of the way things were. So the best stuff professionally, it used to be like this sort of stuff, and it used to basically be vibes. It was pundits. And then it became, for us, in our adolescence, math. And so a lot of things follow this pattern, where they became very quantified, in part because it was stuff that we all liked. And so like there is an obvious question here on this chart, which is there's a third side. Like, what is this? Mainly because like this is not a thing that stays fixed. This basically is like a generational thing. And as we age, there is a new generation that starts to ride up this curve. And so where does this go? I mean, y'all can probably figure this out. But the second page of that code of points, like literally the second page, the first one was the one you saw. This is the second page. It is an ad from Fujitsu for their like 3D sensing AI and gymnastics scoring system. And so what does this thing do? This thing basically, it watches gymnasts do stuff. And what it does not do is it does not say, okay, good, take those things, transfer them into this crazy code of points, put them all into this crazy scoring and give them that. Basically, it says, hey, we're going to watch it. We're going to compare it to a whole bunch of examples of other routines that are sort of like said these are how good these routines are, and then we're going to give you a final score. So we're going to have this thing that is basically the perfect judge. It isn't a judge that's going through all this quantification. It's a judge that says, I've seen every gymnastics routine ever, and I can attempt to say which ones are best. And so the best stuff professionally used to be this, and later, I don't know, it's like AI stuff, or it's vibes. It's like a different kind of vibes, but it's vibes. And so if you look at this chart, you may notice three things. One is that this is already a thing that's kind of happening. Like vibes are a thing that are ascendant. So Zoran won to be the mayor of New York yesterday. A lot of his campaign was sort of vibes-based. There was a big trend in like 2008 and the Obama years that campaigns are very oriented around like extreme number crunching. A lot of the new campaigns like Zoran's are very much like, well, we do it on TikTok and we base it on vibes. And this has nothing to do with AI. This is just like, this is how people are starting to think. There's some rejection of, we over-quantified stuff. In the presidential election, Trump kind of won a lot of this way. I worked for Kamala for 4 or 5 months. This was how Kamala ran her campaign in some ways. The sort of brat thing was sort of a famous part of it. But it also shows up in other places too, that if you talk to like the Utes, a lot of them say things about like taste eating Silicon, this is someone else, but like taste eating Silicon Valley. There's a lot of stuff being built in Silicon Valley that is less oriented around how do we optimize everything, how do we A/B test everything, and much more around how do we just build something that is really well crafted? How do we build something that has really good vibes? And so like vibes in some ways here are broadly ascendant. Kind of what some of the folks in the panel earlier were saying. A second thing you may notice from that like vibe chart, and a lot of us in this room may be like, is like, wait a minute, we need something objective. And this ain't objective, like this is not objective. This is like some computer telling us what to do. This is crazy, we don't want to do that. No, part of that is we naturally would say that because we're these people, like this is our whole thing. But another thing is like, this is actually not that objective of a thing to measure. That there are some sports in the Olympics, like the 100-meter dash, also famously close, that this is a very objective thing, like who crossed the line first. It's pretty straightforward. It's actually not that straightforward because like what part of your body is first? I don't know, like it's your shoulders apparently, or clavicle I think. But it's like fairly objective. This, despite us putting it in charts and tables, is not really that objective. This is a fairly subjective thing. And you'll notice that if you zoom in on that bottom stuff you can get deductions for is like poor rhythm and elements. Like, I don't know what that, I mean, maybe they know better than I do, but like that's not a numeric thing inherently. That is like us applying a numeric thing to a subjective thing. But also, the other big part of this is this score, which looks like a giant formula, is full of a ton of subjective things. So like, why are these elements worth these points? Why do we make these decisions that certain things are worth certain points? Why are there 8? Why not 10? Why not 6? I don't know, somebody just decided 8. Why are E scores out of 10? There's a certain weighting that happens here when the D scores are at certain numbers and the E scores are 10. Why do we evaluate it that way? Like, why are the deductions the deductions? Why can't certain scores be reviewed? There's all these weird laws about what you can review and not. And also, like, what in the world is going on with this? All of these things are fairly subjective rules that get applied for like an air of quantitativeness, but in reality, there's a lot of subjective stuff that gets added. And so really, the best stuff professionally here isn't just like math, it's kind of like numeric vibes. It's like quantitative-ish. And so that's not that different. The third thing that you may notice, though, if you look at this chart, is this chart looks like another chart, which is like this one. And so actually it may be that the best way to judge this is like, how are the vibes? That why do we have all of this crazy rubric? Like maybe we should just do this. Okay, so like, also like what are we talking about? Some people are like, okay, this is all fine, like makes sense. We're talking about gymnastics, we do data stuff, it's businesses. We have built an enormous number of tools to support not vibes, but data. Like how in the world does any of this happen? What are you saying? Okay, so to make this like a little more business oriented in a way, imagine that you are an analyst and you're sitting here and your boss calls you into the office and your boss is like, hey, I have a question for you. And you're like, who, me? And your boss is like, yes, you. Is our business in good shape? And you like look at him for a second and say, well, it depends on what you mean by good. It depends on what kind of business you're referring to. The overall balance sheet is in flux. We lost $70 billion last night. But that's exclusive of this 3X revolver, and our exposure is already down 120%, blah, 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 blah. And then your boss looks at you like this and says, it's a simple question, doctor. So like, okay, this is like an extreme example. Most of us probably have not sat in a collapsing financial firm as the world falls apart. But we probably have gotten a lot of questions that are like this, of like, what do our customers think of our new release? Why do we lose the deals we lose? Which customers are at risk of churning? Shout out to Jordan. This shows you when these slides got made. Even how much money do we make? Seems like a question we should have an answer to. And we give answers like this. We give these sorts of things of like, well, it depends on what you mean by money. What's an active user? I don't know. We have conservative ones. We have like aggressive ones. What's a weekly active user? How do we define all this stuff? And we end up presenting charts like this that have all of this kind of like weird minutia in them, and they aren't actual real answers. And then we get a look from our boss being like, what the? And if they had a tool, it was not this. It was not us giving these weird answers, but was just this. It was just like, okay, what are your customers saying? And this is not built in the prior conversation, a lot of it was talking about how do you build like agentic analysts. This is not built on top of that. This is like the thing that does the gymnastics evaluation, where it is not write a query, make a chart. It is just saying, like, there's a bunch of support tickets. I'm going to read them. That's kind of what I'm good at. And then I'll give you a vibe. Like, are they going to use that? Are they going to use that, or are they going to use the analyst that gives this giant paragraph of answers as to why things are different, what they mean, why revenue is not what we say it is, all that sort of stuff. And again, we may have this objection of like, it's not objective, like that doesn't work, you can't do that, which one is a brief plug. We're working on some stuff to build some benchmarks to figure that out. But the other thing I'll say is, to quote, this is a weird way to go, to quote Stalin, which I don't really want to do, like this is disputed if Stalin said it or Napoleon said it, so we're going to go with the Napoleon side. Quantity has a quality all its own. And so if you get a ton of answers from things like this, at some point, the quality doesn't matter that much. That if you're having to wait 457 days for an answer versus you get a score right away, you'll take that one. And so like this is how we transition into this new world of vibes, is these things will give us answers really quickly, whereas a lot of the data stuff won't, and it'll give us this weird dispute. So the last thing I want to talk about here, or close with, is there's this tweet from Sean Taylor from a while back. Some of y'all may know Sean. Sean's great. That basically is like, there is a ton of faith in doing data work. That like, okay, what does it mean? We have to hire a bunch of really expensive people. They're going to look at really like esoteric numbers and do all this stuff. And how do we know if any of it works? We'll hire more of them. They'll tell us. And like, okay, there's a whole lot of faith built into this, and a whole lot of faith built into like this trend that has been the data stuff that we've done for so long. But this faith is fairly fragile. And if we run into problems like this, where there's a whole bunch of lawsuits because we try to do data stuff, if you run into problems like this, where a lot of the tools we built don't really work out, if everything else is getting done by vibes, so people are writing a ton of code with vibes, as all this stuff happens, and if the world sort of exists around vibes, so this is an article from the New York Times a couple days ago about like new dating apps. They are matching people not based on these giant like algorithmic matching patterns, but based on like what are your profile state, and we'll just smash it together with vibes. And if this stuff works, which apparently it does in this article, someone from San Francisco, if you're here, hello, was pleasantly surprised by the way the AI worked, and she said the AI actually did a good job of finding compatibility. If this stuff works, and this is from people who are the up-and-coming generation, then like this is probably what's going to happen. That this will be the next best stuff professionally, and we'll be the folks that are the old geezers off to the side. And with that, I'm going to stop. Thank you, everybody. That's it.